Hi folks, my name is Benoit Leroy and I'm a water waste and energy alchemist, and we'll be spending a few moments trying to explain some of the nuances and misinformation around seawater desalination. Firstly, desalination is in actual fact pure biomimicry. What do we mean by this? All we are doing in desalination is actually mimicking the biology of nature, the water cycle. So naturally we have seawater being subjected to heat in the day, and what happens is you get evaporation of the water. That water is salt free and ends up forming clouds. We have precipitation or rain when the dew point is ideal. So what happens is we've got an infinitely renewable cycle where nature's energy is used to evaporate water. So this is a purely natural process, and biomimicry is in actual fact inherent in most of our systems, although we are not aware of it. What we have to do as humans, though, is ensure that when we biomimic, that we stay as close to the knock-on effects of nature and mitigate anything that could throw things out of kilter. And as humans, we're quite good, so we engineer solutions. The three contentious topics about desalination tend to be that A, desalination is expensive, B, it uses a lot of energy, and C, brine is toxic. And with this, a lot of folk are misguided, misled, and really projects delayed unnecessarily where these are in actual fact not anywhere close to the truth. I will try and debunk these one at a time. So firstly, desalination is expensive. What is expensive? Not having any water, not having water security. What happens with what when we desalinate on the coast? And remembering we also desalinate inland, but talking specifically about seawater desalination on the coast, what we're doing is we're using an infinitely renewable supply of seawater. The expensive came in when we were doing thermal evaporation like the sun does, so using relatively cheap fossil fuels in the Middle East, which is water scarce, to desalinate water for the petrochemical industry and for the folk who need water to work in those industries. This is not necessarily expensive because they had absolutely no water. But having said this, is that our surface waters in South Africa are generally speaking from rain that is harvested into dams, and we have a very sophisticated system of dams, and our average prices to store that water, to take the water, to pump it through to purification works and pump it through to cities is between 8 Rand and 12 Rand a cubic meter. And this is a reasonably accurate price that is in the public domain from our water boards and the like. Some of our surface waters are up to 18 Rand a cubic meter. So if we just take 10 Rand as an average in South Africa, we have a relatively good benchmark. Seawater desalination is about half that at the moment, and this is based on concessions. So where contractors in the world they bid competitively, they contract it, and they deliver desalinated water to the municipal reservoir, which is then distributed as it would be from any other source. That at the moment, the latest plants over the last 2 years is about 30 US cents or 4.50 a cubic meter. So that's less than half of the South African prices. And that's total delivered. Cost of equipment, chemicals, energy, all told. Having said that, the latest trends are that we're going to go for 20 US cents a cubic meter, which is in the order of 3 Rand a cubic meter. So the prices, the question is how much can the prices go down? We don't know, but I think we're at 20 US cents, we are close to the sweet spot. The myth that desalinated water is expensive is a 20-year-old one. It was then. It isn't now. So I think we can discount the first one, that desalination is expensive. It is not. Now let's talk about the second myth, that desalination uses high energy. Indeed, 2 decades ago, we were using around 8 kilowatt hours per cubic meter or 1,000 liters of water produced. And today we are running between 2 and 2.5 kilowatt hour. So very much like the evolution of light bulbs to LEDs, we've managed to decrease this through engineering, through membrane architecture, through material improvements, and also through energy recovery in these systems. So we are using energy recovery systems that are quite sophisticated. Having said that, 2.5 kilowatt hour per cubic meter is more than what we would need to purify water at a purification works. However, these purification works tend to be closer to the dams, quite far from the cities, and we have huge conveyance costs. So when we look at desalination, is we take out of the sea right there next to the city and deliver the produced potable water or desalinated water straight into the reservoir. So the conveyance or the pumping costs are far lower to actually get the final product through to the municipality, which is generally speaking, desalinated water is used. The same goes for industry. Industry, generally speaking, is along the coastline in the Middle East, where we have the oil refineries and petrochemical plants, aluminium smelters, and all the likes. From an energy perspective, it's in actual fact quite a moot point. If you take the total life cycle costs in, so including conveyance from the traditional resources. Having said that, using fossil fuel derived energy to drive the reverse osmosis process is also not sustainable, but that applies for any production of water. Luckily, then this is not for the traditional sources of surface water and groundwater, but luckily with desalination, using seawater reverse osmosis, the latest plants now are entirely driven by renewable energy. And this is one of the reasons that we've managed to reduce the carbon footprint, firstly, and secondly, to reduce the actual input costs, where energy is 30 to 40% of the price of producing seawater reverse osmosis desalinated water. Thermal processes are more energy intensive and generally speaking not being rolled out anymore because cheap fossil fuels don't exist. So seawater reverse osmosis using membranes and artificially or biomimicking the natural process of osmosis with a bit of energy, we reverse that and we're able to desalinate the water. The high energy issue is in actual fact not an issue. We've reduced the footprint, but also using renewable energy. And the reality is that desalinated water now through seawater reverse osmosis is less than a third of the price of our traditional surface waters. So energy is no longer an issue. The third myth we need to have a look at is in actual fact that brine is toxic. Well, the good news is that swimming in the sea has not killed us because of the salt in the sea. So brine is not necessarily toxic. That's the first thing one has to understand. The other thing is, if you look at seawater desalination using reverse osmosis membranes, typically for every 100 liters that we take out of the sea, we produce 50 liters of desalinated water, and we return 50 liters of water with double the amount of brine back into the sea, into a discharge pipeline, which we call an outfall. The way these outfalls are designed is in actual fact to, over a big area, is to disperse that brine so that it reaches an equilibrium with the background salt water concentrations. And this is aided by a natural process, osmosis, and also the fact that brine is hygroscopic. In other words, it attracts water. So the brine, the concentrated brine going back into the sea, in actual fact, scavenges the water around to reach equilibrium as quickly as possible. So there are no negative effects with the brine return, as long as it's into an open ocean, which we have in South Africa. We also have high currents. So that naturally helps disperse the brine on top of that. This actually debunks it completely. And in actual fact, when we start talking about brine, everybody, and its toxicity, which it isn't, everybody starts saying, but in the Middle East, in the Red Sea, in the Arabian Gulf, and like, these are closed areas. Initially, the science was not as well understood, but the biggest increase in brine concentration in the MENA, Middle East, North Africa region is in actual fact higher temperatures causing high evaporation. So it's actually not the desalination process, although there might be some point source issues, but as I said, these can be engineered. So inland, we also do not seawater desalination, but we do brackish water desalination. And there we do not have an ocean to discharge back into. But we in South Africa, being innovative, have managed to engineer that we recover 99% of the water. So we only have 1 liter of that 100 liter that we took into our desalination system, where we have brine. That small volume makes it economical to now mine that brine, and we have the so-called brine economy that is being developed globally, and South Africa is in the middle of it. We'll have more to talk about these, but desalination is a natural process. Thank you very much for listening to me. My name is Benoit Leroy, and I'm a water, waste, and energy alchemist.